All right, thank you everybody for being here. I see people coming in. Thank you so much. I wanted to mention before we get started, I had reached out to a bunch of alums, and I know that some of our alumni are here with us today. So we have current students, but we also have some other alums, and everyone who's presenting today. We have Larry Weru, we have Kathryn. Kathryn, do you go by you like Kathryn-kay or do you like Kathryn?
Just Kathryn's fine.
Kathryn Johnson, okay, and Brittany Grass. And then we have some other people that are here with us today in our audience that are also some alums. And I'm so glad that you were able to join us today. I really appreciate it. But we're going to have a discussion today about design in particular. And we have some questions that we've generated from our students. So we're going to go through those. And at the end of our discussion, then we'll have time at the end for any Q&A for anything that our audience wants to ask our presenters. So if you could do me a favor, and if there is a question that you would like to ask, if you could go ahead and put it in our chat, and then we'll collect those questions and we'll ask at the end. Okay, so we'll go through our prepared questions first, and then we'll do the live Q&A at the end. So I just want to say formally thank you for our presenters taking the time out. I know everyone's super busy, especially this time of year. So thank you so much for your time. Greatly appreciate you being here. And also want to say thank you to Carrie Fee, who is our professor in art history and in studio art. Thank you for being with us today. Greatly appreciate you being here. So I want to just formally introduce everybody, give you all a little background about each of our presenters, and show you a little bit of their work, the amazing talents that we have here today. You all, I went through some of your history and background, and I'm just so amazed at the work that you all have done. So I'm going to share my screen really quickly, and I'm going to do these introductions for you all. Okay. All right. So we're going to start with Kathryn Johnson. You all can see my slide okay? Okay, great. All right, so Kathryn received her BA in Studio Art in 2016. Kathryn was born in St. Andrew, Jamaica, and is an American digital media and video artist. She utilizes appropriated media from contemporary advertising culture, along with text, fabric, audio, video, and digital fabrication processes to develop a sensorial fictive placemaking that is rooted in African diasporic mythologies and a womanist perspective. Her work gives voice to the powerful, inarticulable, contradiction-filled crises and delights of the human experience. She is currently an MFA candidate at the Yale University School of Art. So welcome, Kathryn. And next we have Brittany Grass. Brittany received her BA in Studio Art in 2016. Brittany is a visual artist who specializes in social design and community innovation. Her passion for the fine arts fuels her work with local nonprofits to create meaningful projects that question, uplift, and empower the community. For the last 5 years, Brittany has worked at the Florida Geographic Alliance, a nonprofit organization which promotes science education throughout Florida. In her free time, Brittany works with other local designers to create opportunities for creatives in Tallahassee. Some recent events she's organized include Design Week Tallahassee, the Women in Leadership and Design series, and the virtual reality drive-in movie theater. So welcome, Brittany. And then finally, we have Larry Weru. Larry received dual degrees in studio art and biological science in 2014. Larry is an entrepreneur, visual storyteller, and data scientist whose contributions are featured by Fast Company, TEDx, and Hacker Noon. In 2015, he gave a TEDx talk to discuss how color theory can help us make better election maps. In 2019, his Muddy America election map and color balancing algorithm went viral, receiving over 250,000 visitors and 12,000 upvotes on Reddit. Most recently, Larry's app for Cornell note-taking called Columns was approved for the Mac App Store. It has since gone global, reaching users in the USA and Canada, Europe, Asia Pacific, Africa, the Middle East, India, Latin America, and the Caribbean. This year, Larry was selected to participate in the Media and Medicine Intensive program from Harvard Medical School to explore how storytelling and visual communications can be used to impact public health. So thank you, Larry. Thank you all for being here. Super, super amazing work that you all are doing. I'm so impressed of how you all are taking your training, your expertise in art, and then translating it in so many different ways. It's so impressive. And I feel like I know that I could ask you so many questions and we could be here for hours today, and just would love to continue this conversation about what you all are doing. And I know we have limited time, so I'm not going to keep gabbing. Let's get into it. Let's hear what you all have to say. So I wanted to start talking today, since you all are designers, you come from the studio art program, you got your initial, at least your college training in studio art. I want to hear about how you kind of translated that into your design practice and how that's kind of branched out. So, you know, in particular, since we're all kind of coming from studio art or we're involved in studio art in some way, how do you feel about this kind of comparison or combination of art and design? You know, what do you think of the differences between art and design for you personally? And what do you think makes a good designer? So whoever would like to go first, we can all talk about this.
I can go first.
Yeah.
So this is a question that I think about like all the time. And I think it's one of those questions that's really popular in the art design community because it's something that everybody has a different answer for. I think maybe one of the popular answers is that design prioritizes function, or that it's about problem solving, or anything like that. But I found that the answer is a little more gray for me. It's it might sound unhelpful at first, but I think that art and design exist on a spectrum, and like that spectrum isn't necessarily a linear spectrum, and it's ultimately up for like just each person to decide what is art and what is design for them. I can say that for me personally, it's less about what I do that makes me a designer and more about what design as a profession does for me, and how it allows me to interact with the world. So for example, as a designer, you don't always get to choose what you're working on, and you're not always familiar with the concepts and the ideas that you're supposed to represent and give life to. And I found that because of that, it's important for me to talk to people and really sit down with them and learn like what is really going on behind the work that they're doing, why they love it, why it's important to them. And gradually, like you start to learn how to love the work that they're doing the way that they do. And that's a really crucial aspect of it, because then you help them translate that to the rest of the world. And I really think that being a designer has given me that opportunity to just practice empathy on a huge scale. And I think for me, especially as a young artist, I found it really difficult to connect with people in that way. And being a designer has kind of allowed me to step outside of that, and or step outside of using art just for my own ideas, and like as a sounding board for my own thoughts and ideas. And I can now like prioritize connection and service in a way that I didn't know how to before. And that's been the most meaningful distinction for me.
Great, thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, I feel like, Brittany, you touched on some really good points there as far as that spectrum and the gray area. And it's like always a question that comes up because it's honestly sort of difficult to answer. And it really, I think it means different things for different people, just like you said. And so um, I think for me, the kind of idea of like the client relationship and also how I think about audience is the kind of the big difference for between design and art for me. And so um, just what you touched on with like how the work comes to you is what I'm considering client in terms of you don't always get to choose what you're working on, and it may not be coming from like a personal space, but you speak to the client and get a sense of that research. And then also speaking to audience, I feel that in the art world, there's something about like creating like a sense of rarity around your work. Um, and in design, your audience is usually a lot broader. And that's something that really drew me to design right away. Um, and I also, in terms of like what makes a good designer, I always consider design as like storytelling. That's sort of my viewpoint. And really, it's like getting a sense of what is the story here that we're trying to tell and deliver. And I think sometimes even like a client might be like really know what like their research is or what they're interested in, but you do have to kind of connect the dots or like really figure out how to deliver that best to the audience. And so for me, a good designer can like sit in that space that's almost like a translator or something, and help to like pull out those stories and you know make it big, make it connect.
Yeah, I agree with everything that was said. I think I had a hard time just like hopping in and saying like, this is art and this is design, because it's almost like you can use art as a tool in design, right? And you can kind of like mesh them in ways that there's not like a clear line. Like for me, like when I made my maps, I didn't set out to make my maps. Like originally I wasn't thinking, hey, there is a problem with the maps that exist. It was really like an artistic exploration. I was just looking at the election results and I was trying to map things. And then I was just asking myself, what if I messed with the colors? It was a very artistic thing. And it just so turned out that if I messed with the colors a certain way, it created a new kind of map that served a purpose. And that purpose was this map can make things clearer. Like it has now it's no longer just a work of art, but it can be used as a tool that maybe a researcher or somebody else who wasn't even my audience originally. Um, so I just think that's interesting how you can kind of almost create art and then in the end realize, hey, I'm actually also working on something that is useful, like in a field. So that's interesting.
Thank you, Larry. So I wanted, you all are kind of touching on this, but I want to kind of dive a little bit deeper into this art and design. So since you all had this training in art from FSU, you all came from the same program, although slightly different times. Do you ever think about if you didn't have that training, would that change the way you approach your work as a designer? If you didn't have the training, would it be different? Do you consider it a value that you had it? What do you all, I know it's hard to ask that question of you because you can't take yourself out of that. You had that experience, but I'm just wondering for those people that do not have that experience, how does it compare for you all that have had it?
Yeah, I'm gonna jump into this, absolutely. And the reason why I say this is yes, I've learned art, but I've also dabbled into other fields. And art is one of the only fields where you actually create things, and then we all assemble and we ask ourselves what's awesome about it, what needs, changes. And in other fields, it's almost like you learn and recite. You don't really ask a lot about, here's something I created, how can I improve it? And that alone, that process is something that you can use in any field. Like if you're working on a new app, that's a question you ask yourself a lot. If you're working on a new company, even, it's like the process of, I'm creating something, how can I improve it? That is something that's almost unique to the arts.
Yeah, and I think my answer is actually very similar, because the big thing for me is that I was like training as a conceptual artist, and working with Julietta, who I think isn't there anymore, but she really pushed me. But
But Julietta has that same background, right? We're talking about Julietta Chung, who was a professor in our program. Yeah.
Yeah, she had I think a publishing background.
Yeah.
And it really gave me a criticality. And that's the word that like I keep coming back to, and I feel like I've been able to notice it as I kind of was moving along after graduating. But having that criticality, I think it's really helped me push, like, for one, like design decisions, but also it really helped me push myself. And at one point I was at my first job for 2 years, and I really wasn't happy there. And I kept like interviewing, trying to like get out of that space. And at some point I just decided to leave and to start my own apparel company, Between Culture Apparel. And I was very nervous about making that decision. But that ended up being like the most important thing I could have done for my career, because it actually helped me get the job I got after that, and helped me get into the MFA program that I'm in now. To be able to kind of step back and like question my decisions, question the way we're thinking about something. It's like that training really came from operating as a conceptual artist, and having that like pushback from some really cool professors.
Yeah, I completely agree with both of them. My answer is just like a hybrid of both of their answers. And Kathryn, I'm so excited that you brought up Julietta, because I had Julietta too, and she was like such a huge influence on all of my art. So
yes.
she's great. Yeah, she was a really wonderful professor. But yeah, so I think that what Larry was talking about in terms of being an art major, teaching you how to build things from basically like you go through the entire process of creation. So it's from inception of the idea all the way to like making the individual parts, all the way to assembly, to execution, getting the full knowledge of that like entire cyclical process of creation to like even disassembling something. It's just really paradigm shifting, like you really start to understand that nothing is kind of out of your reach in terms of innovation. Like everything comes from somewhere, and you are just as capable as anyone else of creating that thing. And then more to what Kathryn was saying, being an art major really taught me critical thinking skills that I don't think I would have gotten anywhere else, because you are really sort of forced to interrogate your own ideas, your own motivations. And then not only do you interrogate them for yourself, but then you have to defend those decisions and motivations to your classmates, and explain why you made certain decisions, because art is completely subjective, and I don't think that's something that can be said for a lot of other majors. So if you make a decision, it's not based on something that you memorized or something that came out of a textbook. It's something that you're pulling from your real life experience and your world experience, and you have to be able to either articulate it to others through your words or through your actions, or through, more importantly, through your art. So
Great. So I feel like I want to tie one more piece into there, which is kind of going back to some of the things that you all have been saying as far as personal, maybe your personal voice. I think Brittany, you were saying something about this initially about, that it's, an art making practice comes a lot from your own personal emotive, you know and I'm coming from a position where I'm not a designer, right? So I'm trying to learn more from you all about what it's like to be a designer. Does your personal perspective, your personal voice come into play when you're designing?
That's a really good question. And I think it differs from project to project. It depends on what is being asked of you on a certain project. Like sometimes you'll come in and the person that you're working with just needs a website that's very clear, has information on it. I work on a lot of like scientific papers and stuff. So it's not really so much that they need a creative voice so much as they need clarity, and they need, it really depends on what the needs of the project are. So if it's a project like that, that relies on clarity and relies on information getting passed on in a factual manner that isn't dense or intimidating, that requires a very different set of my personal voice than a project that's more about like branding, or the purpose of the project is that we want to build excitement in our audience and help people understand what we're offering to them, get them engaged with this educational program. Like that's a completely different set of skills on my part that I have to put into the project. So yeah, I would say that a little pieces of you lead into every project, but you really have to assess what is being asked of you in each assignment.
Mm-hmm. Any thoughts?
I would say on top of that, yeah, I
Larry?
mean, sure, like some projects you might have where the client knows exactly what they want and you're almost just executing. And other projects, yeah, they might use you more as a consultant, right? Like that they have an idea, but not they don't see it yet and they need your help on that. But ultimately, what made them choose you over somebody else? That's probably also your story.
Mm-hmm.
And there's something to that too.
Yeah, I mean, this question is part of the reason why I entered the MFA program, because I really wanted to get to a point where I had more say in the projects that I was working on. And I mean, the time when I was working on my apparel company was actually kind of like a first step in that direction. And it was really focused on identity and these kinds of very personal like subjects that were like, coming outward. And then I was creating apparel out of that. But that kind of got tabled while I was working at the agency. And so I wanted to be able to develop a practice where people could come to me knowing like what I'm interested in, what I do, and that's kind of that. And since coming into the program, I've actually been operating more as like a conceptual artist, because I think that that's like definitely like a wall that I feel that I've hit with design. And I just want to be as straightforward about that as possible, because it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's something that for me, I feel like I've never been able to really negotiate in a way that like I'm really satisfied with. Yeah.
And I want to ask you this question later too, Kathryn, and get into the MFA a little bit more with you. But do you feel like the MFA is helping you kind of get to where you want? I know you just started the program, so maybe I need to ask you this after after you're done with the program, but
Yeah, I mean, yes. And yeah, I'm going to say yes. I'm going to also say that like, without getting too much into it now, as I know you have some questions coming up, that I think that when you first are starting out as a designer, or at least in my case, like there was a kind of strong sense for me to like prove myself and to prove that like I am good, you know? And so there's been a few times, including getting accepted into the program, where I felt like a kind of validation. And so it's like that almost frees you in a way where you're like, all right, I don't have to prove that I'm good anymore. And it's like, well, then what do I want to do? Like, and what does that mean? And so that's been really like that's been really prevalent for me in the program. And um, I've also just been like one of the most headstrong people, just like really doing what I want. So I feel like it's just allowed me to be really bold in terms of like, I really want to focus on finding my voice a little more.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. Okay, so why don't we dive into the student questions? We have some really great questions that the students generated ahead of time. So I'm going to jump into these, and I think we'll just go around. I'll just go around to each of you asking a different question. We'll just keep going around a little bit. So the first question actually is for all of you. So if you want to each take a turn. So the first question is, thinking about your time at FSU to where you are now, was there a pivotal experience, or maybe you had several, but was there maybe one pivotal experience that led you to where you are now? And could you tell us a little bit about your experience?
I can go first on this one. Yes, there was. I think more than just like a pivotal experience, like in the singular, I had a pivotal year. And that was, I call it my first senior year because I was in college for 5 years, which is a very normal experience. Like if there's anyone on the call who's going through that, 5 years is, it's the new 4 years, so don't worry about it. But I started out as an English major, and I was in the creative writing program. And I decided halfway through that I wanted to also do the studio art program. So I was kind of late to the game, and I was learning all this stuff and learning all these new skills. And at the same time, I think it was a very common experience that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with either of those skills. I didn't know what I wanted to go into, what I wanted to use my art for. I wasn't particularly passionate about any of the options that I thought were the only options. Like you either end up in a gallery or you end up designing logos, and neither of those really appealed to me. And on the other side of that, I also wasn't really too keen on looking for options because I was a very, very shy person. I was one of those people that hated going into any class that had to do with group work. Critiques always, like, I would dread them. And like, I remember almost all of my first critiques in the art program, I had to like hide my hands under the table because they were shaking so bad. And I think as that kind of person, I really like wasn't going out and meeting people and searching for opportunities and stuff like that. So my first senior year, I sat down and I was like, I need to change something because I don't have a direction right now. And I don't even know where to begin looking for a direction. So I decided that for 1 year, I would say yes to everything, like any opportunity that came my way, even if it was something that I had no interest in whatsoever, I was going to say yes to it. And that started like right away. And I think the next night after I decided to do that, my sister, who was also my roommate at the time, came into the room and said that she had just been at the club fair on campus and met this person who was working at a fashion magazine on campus, and they were looking for a designer, and she thought I would be really good for it. And I was like, oh boy, well, okay, I guess I'll do that. And I ended up doing that for 2.5 years. And then that same year, I also joined a literature magazine on campus. I went to an event that would later, I would later learn that that was the first design week. And I ended up like running design week at the end of that because of the people that I met there and like just how much I loved it. And really just deciding to do that for a year changed like the course of my entire life. Just saying yes to doing things that I wasn't comfortable with necessarily. Because when you say yes to something, especially in college, if it's like an opportunity that you find out that you hate, that's also just as much, that's just as valuable a piece of information as finding something that you love, because you know not only that you don't like that thing, but you know what it is about that thing that you like, and you can apply that to future things. So if you see, if you really hate strict deadlines, for like the magazine project had very strict deadlines, and you find that you hate that, then in the future when you're looking for jobs, you can find things that are looser on deadlines, allow you more time to like absorb a project. So yeah, I would say that that was the most pivotal experience for me, was just deciding to say yes. And I don't recommend like sticking with that for the long term, because it's exhausting, and that's like it's difficult to unlearn saying yes to too many things. But for the short term, I think it's a good strategy.
Great, thank you.
Yeah, I think like a common advice is to try things out. And if you don't like something, you can always just decide not to do it anymore. But you just found out, you know, as you've mentioned, that it's not for you. So for me, I did a lot of things in college, from joining organizations to having internships. And I think all of those things kind of shaped me in certain ways. You know, I had a software engineering internship. Even though I wasn't like learning coding in school, it was a skill I had. And, I had that internship for a summer. And afterwards, I realized I'm not the kind of person who wants to just sit inside of, like it just wasn't for me. It was hard to describe why, but I just knew, hey, this isn't for me. And I think that was useful because it also opened my eyes to other things. For example, in 2019, my largest client is somebody that I was introduced to at FSU. And it's crazy how, you can't always like see these things happening in certain ways. Like there's no way like in undergrad, I was thinking 5 years from now, this guy, he'll be my largest client, but what I did do was somebody introduced us because I was working on other things that were similar. And, just we had a relationship, and I helped him with, I think I helped him make a website. It was something really simple. But then, a couple years later, he reached out to me. He was like, hey, I'm the chief operating officer of this company, and I want you to help me, with all these kinds of aspects. So like, there's no way you can kind of see these things. But if you just kind of just like follow your interests, and, if you meet somebody, try to, don't like just say goodbye, just like, message them every once in a while. You never know.
I'd say my pivotal experience, I mentioned earlier, but it was starting my apparel company, Between Culture Apparel. And I think I was really like focused on like having a job and like being a good, productive citizen that makes money and has healthcare and stuff. And like, and I feel like I couldn't really, while I was at my first job, I actually went on probably like 20 different interviews trying to find my next opportunity. And I came really close sometimes, and it was just like a really stressful time for me. And so when I eventually decided to leave, I realized that like I just kind of hit a breaking point, and I needed to just focus on creating something that I was really excited about. And yeah, so that was my pivotal experience, because from that I ended up getting the position that I had after that from the work that I was creating by myself. And so there was something about like the work, like my personal voice and following that people were connecting with that more than when I was like trying to compromise and, you know, just do what I needed to do at the kind of like bottom level of a company as a kind of low level designer. And that was like really like a kind of big boost for my confidence, but it also is just like I learned a lot of um, really wonderful like practical lessons and just yeah, I'm not sure how to end this, but I'm gonna go in circles. Um, yeah, between culture apparel.
Yeah. All right. So let's see. I'm gonna ask Larry. So your election map, which is it's so amazing, it's so interesting. Can you tell us a little bit about the story of the election map? Do you think that the election map would be beneficial to, major elections in the US, going forward? I know it's gotten a lot of attention. Do you see that as something that could be beneficial in the future? Do you think it would bring any changes or improvements to the election process?
I hope so. I hope it can have an impact. So the election map, it's a map that it tries to improve on a map. Um, so like as we know, like anytime we have a county and we mix we mix the colors. Sorry, sometimes I stutter. Um, we can have a new color that's hard to tell. You know, if it's purple, it could be more red or more blue. So I created a new map that made it really easy to tell if a county was leaning red or leaning blue, even if the votes are really close. Um, and I think that kind of map is useful because we tend to, like after every election, we see it. We look at states as a whole. You see, oh, that's a red state, or oh, that whole, it's just one color. But you know, like there is no place you can go where everybody is going to vote the same way. And if you're somebody who's trying to, research where to campaign or, figure out, are there certain parts that we could probably, um, and, yeah, if you're researching where to campaign, and you're able to tell, at a county level, this place has more people than you might expect, then that's helpful because that's a place you might not have, went to. Like in 2016, we saw New Hampshire. It went to Hillary Clinton, but only by 1,200 votes. And you can fit that many people in like a small space. So if you can find somewhere that can get you 1,201 votes, or if you can find that many people, you can flip an entire state. So it's helpful to look things in this way. I hope it's useful.
And it was your background in color theory that led you to redesign those maps, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I when I was making the maps, I wasn't, I was looking at it as here is a county and I'm going to color it a combination of red, green, and blue. And as it so happened, I asked myself, hey, what happens if I actually take one of those colors and increase it? So it was all about, how do I change the colors and what happens as an effect? It wasn't really like at the time, it wasn't me trying to create a new map. It was just me messing around with the colors. But as it turns out, when you mess around with these colors in this way, you create a new map that is easier for the human eye to see. So, yeah.
And just one little tack on to that, because I'm so fascinated with this. So I was looking at some of your other things, like the things that you're doing on the STEM page and how it seems like there's always like a little piece of art that's going into these different, like mixing up your science background and your art background together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, like what exactly when I made that map, but it was because I knew that we see colors in a certain way in our minds. It's that's what I saw, and that's what made me think, hey, this is actually an improvement. If I didn't have that training, I might have just looked at the map as any other thing and moved on. But it's because I know we have a hard time telling between colors, and there's certain aspects of it that you can use to make things easier to see.
Right. That's amazing. That's amazing. Okay, so let's see. Next question. Kathryn, here's a question for you. Can you tell us more about how you developed your subject matter, in particular, including African diasporic mythologies and approaching contemporary advertising culture in your work?
Sure. So I think a lot of what I've been thinking about emerged out of my experience as a third culture kid. My family moved to the US when I was 3 years old from Jamaica. And I always kind of grew up in this between space of like living between these two cultures. I've also just been doing research into the history of various different cities and areas in the US and their kind of links to West African cultures, the kind of connections that I've been making and seeing that there are similarities to histories and mythologies in Jamaica. And it's just been like very interesting and exciting for me, but it's emerged out of that experience of like growing up in that between space. And I've really been thinking of it as a kind of like placemaking for myself in terms of like trying to like find a place that's like very me, or that feels like home, or that feels like I am kind of connecting all of these like different histories to create like a space that makes sense for myself. And so that's largely emerged out of my own personal experience, and it's been the kind of foundation of the body of research that I'm into now. And the experience of going from having my apparel company to working full time at the agency and having to kind of table like, my sense of identity and the sense of like exploring that, that was really pivotal for me. And so being in that advertising space, um, I don't even know how to get into it, but in answering the advertising question specifically, a lot of what I'm doing now is just kind of reacting against the experience that I had working in the branding agency. And there's a lot in that space, that corporate space, that upholds the status quo. And I have really been reflecting on what that means, and identifying a lot of that as like a kind of like white supremacist, history that's like still really entangled in what the status quo is. And so, in one example, there's like a kind of like racial tokenization that is really kind of upheld in spaces like that. And that like manifests in, say, like photo shoots, where like I might hear conversations about like maintaining the right balance of like the kind of right racial balance of like who we have in the photo shoot. And it's like, it's that kind of thing that when you're on the kind of consumer end, it's a subtle message. And I've really wanted to be able to like call attention to it more. In another example, there's like, I was working in Miami, where the hospitality industry is the kind of major industry. And so a lot of the clients come to us wanting something that feels like luxury, that suggests luxury. And one kind of visual language of luxury and typefaces, for example, is a kind of serif typeface, like a vanishing serif. And, if you would think about that a little bit, the serif typeface is calling to like a kind of 20th century idea of heritage. And, heritage kind of it's this kind of signifier, right? That's like, rooted in, it's rooted in like a kind of class difference, a race difference. There's also sort of prioritizing of like the French aesthetic and the Italian aesthetic as luxury. So there's this kind of also like colonial implication. And, so there's a lot of specific experiences that I had. In one case, we had a client that wanted to have like a New Year's Eve event inspired by the Cotton Club. And the Cotton Club is, a racially segregated club. And there's not really much more thinking on it other than like, let's have like a Gatsby themed party. But like all of these kinds of things that I really felt like I was experiencing every day really contribute to one part of a kind of larger politics of representation, for one, but also just like, what are those messages saying? And I really wanted to spend time investigating that because I just don't feel like there's as much discourse on this topic, and also the kind of like bureaucratic nature, the alienation of the kind of labor situation that we're in. And so I've been appropriating imagery from advertising and branding, and trying to kind of like reposition those images, and really like just pulling from that experience that I had, which for me was very intense. And I think especially after 2020 and the summer that we had, I feel like I can't not talk about it. And it's really, it's affected me in a huge way. They're very small things at the time, like kind of like microaggressions or just like subtle things, but they really contribute to a much larger story. And so I've been using those images to kind of like reframe this story. And Betty Saar is an artist that I've been thinking about a lot in this in this quest, where she like takes these knickknacks or different things from like garage sales and that kind of thing, and they're like just they have this like racist imagery, and she like reframes them, reframes these stereotypes and creates like new images out of them. And yeah. So I've really just been reacting from my personal experiences, and wanting to be able to start that conversation and keep that going.
Wow, that's amazing. That's really great. And hopefully, again, going back to the grad program, hopefully that's an environment that you found the ability to explore these things in more depth. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. All right. Let's see here. Let's give a question to Brittany. Brittany, so you're working right now a lot with nonprofits, right? So how does that work with working with the nonprofits? I mean, the question that was asked was how do you go about choosing a nonprofit to work for? But is that what the process is like? Do you get to kind of select the nonprofits that you work with, or what is that interaction like? Which social concepts or social issues motivate your work, and why?
Right. Well, yeah, I wish it was something like I wish I could say I like sat down and picked and like which things I wanted to work on and said, oh yeah, this and this and this thing I care about. I'm gonna go work on it. But like really just kind of like how I was saying earlier, things tend to be grayer and more messy than that. So I want to think about how to word like how all this stuff happened, but really I think that most of the projects and nonprofits that I've worked with, I sort of stumbled into by accident, or rather I found out about them the more I talked with other people, because yeah, it just goes back to what I was saying earlier, like when you connect with other people and get to witness someone's passion for something, that sort of passion is just contagious, and you start to love that thing too. A good example that I can think of is urban planning. I had a friend who I worked on on a lot of design projects, and she was really frustrated that there were so many parking lots in the city. And I was like, that's a weird thing to focus on. Why? And she said that, or she didn't say anything. She just pulled up an aerial map on her computer and she showed me how much surface area of any given city is just parking garages and parking lots. And it's a huge amount of space. It's space that could be used for public parks. It could be used for housing for the unhoused. It could be just generally green spaces. And I was just kind of floored at how nuts that was. And I still use that in my workshops today when I teach. I teach a program called ArcGIS to students and adults, and it's a geographic information system. So when I'm teaching them how to use it, I'll pull up for kids, especially a map of Disney World, and I'll show them, I'll zoom out and show them just how much of Disney World's property is parking lots. It's like an insane amount of space and land that is taken up for, what in the larger scope of sustainability is like no use at all. So the question normally follows after I show people that, what could that land be in a more sustainable world? And so that all came from that conversation that I had with my friend that one time. So listening to people talk about their projects would make me think, oh gosh, they really care about this, and now I care about it too, and I want to help. And so that's how just things have led to other things, and that's how I've worked on various different projects and nonprofits.
Wow, that's great. Yeah, you all are kind of saying similar things about noticing, like, hey, there's this thing that's going on. Either it's a problem or just noticing something, and how can we improve it? How can we make it better? Right. Common thread there. So, okay. Thank you. So Larry, let me give you another question here, looking at my list. So a bunch of students want to know about your web design, how you got into web design and web building. What would you say are some of the most common mistakes made within web designing or lessons you've learned? And if you were able to talk to your teenage self who was about to embark on their first web project, what advice would you give?
That's an interesting question. Man, it feels like my life was a lot of accidents, right? Like I just kind of like stumble into things and I find out, hey, I'm doing this. So like I built my first website when I was 11.
Really?
I did like what I mean, yeah. That was back when we didn't have laptops or anything like that. So if you wanted to use a computer, you would go to the library. And one day when I was there, my friend was a wrestling fan. So she showed me this website and I was like, oh, cool, wrestlers. It was just like a random website, but as it turns out, it was a website she made. And at the time I was like, whoa, I didn't know we could make websites. It always felt like that's something that somebody else would make, like America Online, or I'm naming things you've probably never heard of in a while, but I thought it was always something that these large companies could make. Up until that point, I didn't know that we could. And that felt like, hey, this is a new voice you can have, right? So it's almost like a medium. So I got into, I was at the library, so they happen to have books. So I was like, I'll get a book on how to make a website, and I'll just read it and do it. I was just really interested in it. Like, this was before the internet was even cool, right? This was just me being interested in something random. Um, but then, like, after I made the website, I went into high school and everything, and I really didn't use that skill anymore. It was just like a skill I had, but it was just, I there was, like, I never needed to use it. And it wasn't until college, actually, that I started working with websites again. So I was involved with United Way, and we were creating an event. And this was at the time when everybody was moving over from MySpace to Facebook. So everybody was hopping online to, interact. And this was the first time really that anybody was really using social media to market an event. Like, we'd start seeing advertisers hop on there to, advertise their 5K, for example, when in the past, that's something that was happening over radio or newspapers or things like that. So, you know, that's what got me into it. Is when I was working with United Way, I was like, hey, we could create our own website, you know, to market our event. We could put everything we want on there. We could register. We could collect money. So, I made this website for us, and it helped the event operate much more smoothly. In the past, we were like, every weekend, we were kind of like um, counting like how many registrants we had and everything. And the website would make that happen in an instant. So it saved us a lot of time. And that's kind of like what made me see the websites are useful, and it's something that can help you out. And I started making more and more websites after that, and I started getting clients that way. Like, after you make one, somebody's like, hey, Larry made a website, so they might refer you to somebody else. And that's kind of how that happened.
So what do you think about, what have you learned from doing all of these projects, these web projects, and what advice do you think you could give for someone who's just starting out with web design?
um, I think if you're an artist, you actually have a lot of the skills already, because you come at creation with a question first. Like, oftentimes you don't necessarily know what it'll look like in the end.
Mhm.
And I think that's a great way to approach it, because if you're designing something and you already have an idea of how it should look, hold on to that, but actually, like, explore, you know, um, like we mentioned, the audience and other things like that. Try to really think about the user. What do they want out of this? How will they interact with it? At the time, everything was laptops, but now we have smartphones. So, like, how are they going to be using this? Like, it's a legitimate question. And try to see how you can make that experience better. And honestly, like, the best way that I've seen is to make something quick. It doesn't have to be perfect, and show it to somebody, you know, like, see how they're interacting with it, because you're so in your head about how it should look and how it should function. Um, and you might find out that you thought people would use it in one way, but they're using it another way. And the sooner you do that, like, you can iterate. So that's my advice on that.
All right. Thank you, Larry. So next question for Kathryn, going back to grad school. And I think that this question is coming up a lot for students because I think, some people are thinking about grad school and some are wondering if should they just jump out into the working world and not do grad school. So I think especially for someone who's a designer and has that design background, is what your thoughts are about someone who might be approaching or thinking about grad school. But also the question came up from students about Do you have anything in mind about where you want your work to go post grad school?
Yeah, man, I really remember being in that place in undergrad in my senior year. Oh my gosh. So I think that if I I'll start with this, which is just that I'm really grateful to have had the opportunity to work out in the professional world before entering a grad program. So, you know, the journey is different for everyone, but I would recommend it. And there's something to kind of like just kind of getting your land legs and seeing where your position, you know, might be in the industry. I think you know, also like grad school is totally a vacation compared to like working in the real world. It's like to have the flexibility to make your own schedule. You just like appreciate it more after working 9 to 5 and plus. But the decision for me to enter, I wasn't planning on applying actually. Uh, I didn't think that I was really going to go to grad school after starting to work. But it came for me out of like just continuing to be like uh, dissatisfied. And I really kept thinking like, oh, like I made it now, like I made it now. And you know, then I would realize that there were things that like I wasn't happy with and that I really wanted to push myself and I didn't want to get comfortable. And that would like inform my decision to like move to the next thing. And so that actually ended up being kind of like a superpower, is to like recognize that that you know that I have to um not get too comfortable, just push myself to the next thing. And so I actually started looking at, when I was in my position at the agency, the whole thing actually started for me when I realized I wasn't happy and I started thinking about like, you know, just where's a place I'd like to work. And I kind of came up with Spotify because would stream a lot of music and I was like, that seems like that'd be cool. Anyways, I noticed that the designers working there, a few of them came from an MFA program at SVA, which I now know, like Brian Collins teaches there of Collins Agency, and they did the, you know, Spotify rebrand. And so there's like a actually like direct connection from SVA to Spotify and to Collins. And so in just like kind of following that path of what other designers did, I was like, oh, maybe I should consider grad school. And so SVA was actually my top choice. I didn't really think I would get into Yale. I was just like, sure, let's try this. Um, and and it's just crazy like how things have changed for me, because I'm like in a completely different frame of mind right now. And so I guess my advice is um really think about like what you want to do. Maybe even like make a list of like where you think you'll see yourself or where you want to go. And and try to figure out like, you know, maybe even reverse engineer, like see someone else whose path you would like to follow and maybe figure out like you know, what can I do to get there. And the crazy thing is like uh you're not going to be where you expected in 2 years or 5 years or 10 years. Like, it's just like, you're not going to, which is wild. Like no matter what, even if you try to be as like tunnel vision as possible. And that's actually really delightful, like really embrace that. It's serendipitous, and allow yourself to like, to go where you need to go and to follow your own, like, you know, internal compass or whatever. But having that kind of starting point to really think about like what I would like to achieve, it really helps kind of ground you in thinking about like your next steps. And like I said, it's just totally not going to be that way. But you know, and just go for it. And like, also just like, don't accept your fate. Like, just really keep pushing yourself, because it's very, and I don't know if Larry and Brittany felt this way, but when I first emerged out of graduating, it was like, it was really overwhelming, and it was very unfun for a while. And it was also unfun for a lot of my friends. And for many, many years, like in different fields, wildly different fields, we all really struggled for a while. And somehow, like, we're all like getting it together now, like, around 27-ish, which is really cool, because sometimes you really don't think it's going to happen for you. Yeah, but I think that it's a big decision on whether to go in to get a graduate degree. Also, you're able to teach, which is something I would love to do at some point. But yeah, really think about it. I really value like lived experience, all the professional experience that I had, even with like me, like I would not highly recommend. That ends up being something that I really want to be part of the discourse of any kind of work that I'm making in the future, because I've been able to like live that firsthand. So yeah. And then where do I want to go next? I mean, I'm really trying to develop a practice that's like kind of living, in the art and design worlds. And the peers in my program who I think are more interested in just being design specific, they're still like really focused on developing a practice, like a practice over a business, right? And developing that like point of view, who they are, and like how they want to kind of introduce themselves to the world. So many of them are planning to do an independent practice after this. Yeah. That's my advice.
Yeah, so one quick follow-up on that, since you mentioned and kind of comparing the advice that you're giving and maybe the thought that you have for yourself. So are you, do you feel, how do I say this? Do you feel okay with keeping it open for yourself, or do you feel like it's necessary to like give yourself that space in grad school where it's like, I don't really know what's coming next, and that's okay, because I'm just going to go through this experience of grad school and
Yeah.
see what happens as a result of it?
Oh
What do
my
you
God.
think about that?
You have to. I think that there's really no way to know. And like sometimes I like put on my blazer and I like totally front for for people about like what I'm gonna do. But I think that you end up like really keeping your self confined if you are very like kind of set on one thing. So right now it's tough. It's difficult to just be like, I don't know what I'm gonna do next year. But I think that like it is also a privilege to be in grad school and to be in that position. And so yeah, I'm just embracing that. I think that answered your question.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
amazing.
yeah, embrace the uncertainty.
Yes. Okay, let's see. So Brittany, one question for you. Do you, because you work so much with nonprofits and you're like devoting a lot of your time and energy toward kind of solving these problems, are you able to take time for yourself? Are you able to channel your creative energy into art that isn't involved with those? Is that important to you? And how do you manage that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a big thing for me is that I need to give myself space to do things just for the sake of doing things, because it's really easy to get very emotionally invested in your work and sort of let that bleed into the rest of your life. And like, especially I think working with nonprofits, there's this sort of devotion that you have to the mission that sort of like encompasses, especially if you're trying to work as a creative professional. Creativity is such a personal thing. So when you're devoting that to your profession and to a cause and things like that, it's really easy for that line to blur between work time and personal time. And I think really that's something that a lot of designers and artists just struggle with in general, being creative professionals. So what I do personally is I work really well with parameters. So I call them my mental playgrounds. So if I know that I need to do something for myself, I'll just kind of set up some parameters. Like this last October, do you guys know about Inktober? It's just like some guy on Instagram started a hashtag, and people for 30 days, the 31 days of October, will create something every single day. And people put up prompt lists so there's a prompt every day. And so I embraced that this year because I was really feeling bogged down by all the things I was working on. And I knew I needed to do something creative that wasn't like in service of another project. So I decided to do that. And the parameters I set for myself was that every day I was going to do a book design, like a book cover. And that was really fun for me because when I set parameters, that allows me to push them, and it allows me to like move them around and stuff. So I found that doing like little mini series like that is the way that I kind of get my catharsis that's like my free time art. And it also is helpful because it allows me to schedule the time for that. So if I know that I have a big project coming up, or if I know that I'm going to finish a big project on that date, that allows me to like work in a little project for me between those two, so that I can just sort of do a mental reset and come back with my full faculties ready to work again.
That's great. So in October, we're going to join you.
Yeah, it's really fun. I encourage everybody to try it once, because I mean, it's one of those things where like you're probably not going to do all of them. I certainly didn't. I think I got like 14 done max, but it's kind of like what Kathryn was saying. You embrace the uncertainty. You also embrace the possibility that you're not going to finish the thing, you know, and that's okay. It's like, it's the experience that you got out of it that's the most important.
That's great. All right. Well, okay. So I have a few more questions here. If anyone in our audience, if you have any questions, I know there's one in the chat right now. We'll definitely get to that. But if you have anything that you want to ask our presenters, please put that in the chat, and then we'll go ahead and make sure that we get those questions out there. But I have a few more. Let's see here. And this is for everyone. So if you could talk about one challenge, maybe well, the way that the student asked the question, I think is great. So what is the hardest adversity you encountered while pursuing your career, and how did you overcome it? Was there a particular instance that you could tell us about, and then how did you overcome that?
I can name two. I think this is like one that isn't, I don't hear it too much, but I think like when, if you're doing something kind of solo, kind of like if you're creating your own company or something like that, like it can be really hard to like know when to turn the clock off, to say, hey, I'm done with my day. But, like managing your energy is probably like the most important thing in my mind. Like if you overwork yourself, and it's something you impose on yourself too, but if you overwork yourself, you won't work as well in the next day or the next week. So like being able to say, hey, I'm done working, I'm going to go hang out with people, I'm going to go work out, I'm going to do other things, and like imposing that on yourself, because there's really nobody else, there's no boss who's saying, hey, take your lunch break. And that's been one thing that's been kind of an adversity in my mind. You don't see it, but it's there. Another thing is just like having the self-confidence to tell people no, because people are gonna approach you with things. And because if you have skills, they want to use your skills. But you can't say yes to everything. And it's kind of like your story is almost like what you say yes to and what you say no to. And trying to make sure that you're being true to yourself and your story, even if it's a friend or somebody, that's been hard. And I also mean, say no to work that's underpriced. Like, if you know you're worth this much and somebody comes to you with something and they want to quote you on something that is just not, it's a great project, but it won't help you out. Like having the confidence to say, hey, my price is this, and if you're not okay with that, then I'm leaving. I'd say that one too.
Yeah, I want to hop onto what he said real quick, because that one of my biggest struggles since I graduated and onward, and I still struggle with it, is advocating for myself. It's really, really easy to slip into not valuing your work the way that you should, because as an artist, you're really representing yourself a lot of the time. That's one of the big things about being a designer and a professional artist in general, that you're not just an artist. You're also your own accountant. You're also your own marketer. You're also, like, if you are someone that is doing freelance, especially, you're doing like 1,000 different jobs and you're in control of your career. And while that's an attractive sounding option, it's also a lot of pressure. And I think a lot of creative people are not naturally inclined to advocating for themselves. So one of the best things you can do is just look to other designers. I've found that going to design conferences has really helped me with that, because like the speeches are great, that people like the talks and things, those are really valuable, but the people you meet there are really the value of conferences, because like you'll find yourself in a group talking about salaries, and someone will tell you how much they're getting paid for how much, like the exact same work that you do, and you're like, that's how much I could be getting paid? Why didn't anybody tell me this? So finding resources in other designers who are usually happy to talk to you if you shoot them a message on LinkedIn or Instagram or whatever, is a huge asset to just like getting that practice in and learning how to advocate for yourself. It's a lifelong lesson. I think it's something that you're never going to be perfect at if you're naturally inclined to be introverted or whatever. But it's something that you need to practice over and over again to just learn how to value yourself and your work.
And I would tack one thing on top of that. Your price this year doesn't have to be your price last year. If you're faster, stronger, better, you can raise your prices. So that's okay too.
Yes to all of that. Like, yes. And also when I started working in an agency and I saw how much they were charging, I was like, what? Yeah, and I really just want to like echo both of those comments. I mean, I just think that it's incredible, and people really try to undervalue creative work, and also try to get you to do free work. And if you want to take on a project for free, there's no problem in that, but like, just don't let yourself get taken advantage of. And I also want to say, like, if you are, and I worked mostly in positions for companies, the same thing applies. The same thing applies for the company as well. And that's just like knowing your worth. Also, and this is a piece of advice that I got and I didn't take, but someone told me not to accept your first job offer, which, you don't need to follow that strictly, but it's really just the idea of, I think there's an excitement when you first come out of school to, just kind of get going in a way. And I think you really should consider if an opportunity is right for you, and feel free to say no, say no. And don't be afraid of being selective, because, you know, at the end of the day, like those positions that you're in, those jobs you take on, those clients you take on, that ends up being what you're known for.
That's great. Thank you. Okay, so I have lots more questions here, but I want to make sure that we get our folks in the chat. So the first one came from Lydia. Lydia asked Brittany, I've never heard about Design Week. Can you talk more about it and how to get involved?
Yeah, well, so normally in normal circumstances that are not 2020 circumstances, Design Week is a week-long event that happens in sometime in October. It's I think like the first week of October, and we bring in local designers, local professionals in the creative industry to do talks and workshops. And we also fly in really well-known designers to talk to just our local community. We do socials during that week. So we have a monthly event normally called Designer Drinks, where we just all the Tallahassee design professionals will meet up at a bar or a restaurant. We'll just kind of hang out. Now we're doing it online, obviously. So that is normally what Design Week is. And I'm sure once things are safe, that is what it will go back to being. This year, we did something a little different where we took Design Week online and we did I think it was 4.5 months. We did a 4.5 month web series. So you can go on Facebook and find Design Week Tallahassee, and you'll see we have 17 episodes where we talked to a lot of different people from a lot of different corners of the creative world. So we talked to April Fitzpatrick, who's an art therapist here in Tallahassee. She does really amazing work. We talked to Albino, who is in the museum world, and we kind of tried to cover our bases with all different sorts of careers in art. So if you're interested in like learning about different areas of the art world, I think we did a pretty good job of getting as many different kinds of professions in as possible. So you can hear people from all different kinds of areas of art talking in our Design Week series. So that's where you can check it out.
So is there a website, or where's the best place to find the info when it's coming up?
The best place right now to find the info is Facebook. We were having a little trouble with our website earlier this week. So facebook.com, I believe. Oh, Carrie just put it in the chat. It's Design Week Tally. So that's where you can find all the episodes and stuff.
Awesome. That's great. Okay. Thank you, Brittany. Okay. So question from Carrie. Carrie said, any advice for emerging designers, current students, or perhaps something you know now that you wish you knew when you were completing your undergrad degree?
Is that for everybody?
Yeah, that's for everybody.
Something I wish I knew. I wish I knew just to talk to people. I know I keep harping on that, but it really it was a difficult lesson for me to learn because I really didn't like going out. I wanted to spend all my time inside, like watching shows. I didn't want to meet new people and ask. If I had questions about design as an industry or art as an industry, even if I knew who to ask, I wouldn't, because I was just like, it was hard for me to talk to people. So I think that is the thing I wish I would have been more open to. I wish I would have embraced the fact that everybody's just human. It's okay to ask somebody you don't know a question. And I really can't say enough how much of an asset it is to be able to just go online and shoot someone a message on LinkedIn or wherever they happen to be, because artists and designers in particular are very kind people and are very compassionate towards your struggles as a young artist. And I have never had someone turn me down for asking a question if I didn't know them, and if I was just, looking for answers about something, whether that be like pricing or it be just kind of general career advice. So that's what I wish I knew.
I actually have sort of like the opposite advice in a way to Brittany, which is like, I wish I had said yes less. because I really was like a yes person, and like I ended up taking on like all of these projects that like I really um I really maybe shouldn't have. And I think when I graduated, I had a portfolio that was like part sculpture, part like illustration, part like painting. It was really everywhere. And I do wish that I had taken some time to really reflect on like what I thought I was going to do next, even knowing that like it may not be the case, um, just so that I could have like maybe focused a little bit more. And I think that would have given me like a stronger start, or like not accepting that first job right away and like spending time to like focus that portfolio a little bit. Yeah.
I guess mine's a little more technical, but it's really simple. I wish I knew financial accounting. I, I just think it's a really useful skill. Um, um, it's, I use it all the time, and it's something that like we don't talk about a lot, but like, you've got to manage your income and everything. So it's just a useful skill, and you can learn it. It's not hard, but just like knowing that you need to know it, that's useful.
That's great advice. That's great advice. Okay, so next question, and I know we're almost out of time. Drex is asking, Kathryn, sometimes the price tags of amazing MFA programs can deter strong candidates from applying. Is this an issue you or someone in your cohort has encountered? Any advice making the long-term investment in your career or finding resources to ease the financial burden?
This is a tough one just because it is very true. Yale in specifically has a need-based financial aid program, which I'm actually just gonna like drop that link in the chat, because that's ended up being the main reason why I chose to come here. The package was really strong, and it wasn't that way for other MFA programs. But I know that some offer like I know the new school offers like merit-based scholarships as well. I really would hope that it wouldn't deter someone from applying. I do think that it's worth applying, seeing what kind of package you get offered, and then like really like calling and emailing that financial aid office. And I was able to like I corresponded a lot with my financial aid advisor, and I know other people were able to like get their package changed a bit. There's also work study in this specific program that I'm in. There's work study, TA ships, and honestly like a little bit of loans. And the reality is grim. I'm like really kind of disappointed with the way the way I feel like things aren't really set up in favor of students. And that's really unfortunate when it comes to this kind of thing. But I'll say that Yale specifically has a really great package. I wouldn't let it deter you. I would just see what that package is like, and really, really follow up. There are also like, great kind of scholarship and other opportunities outside of the school as well. And so the second part of the question, any advice on making a long-term investment? Yeah, I don't know. I just feel like it's worth going for it. For me, it also helped to have the professional experience before, where I was able to save a little bit to help me out. But I do think that like if it is a dream that you have, and I think it's a wonderful dream to have, especially as a degree that you can then go on and teach with. I think that you should try and see what it is, what you have to do to make it happen. And really don't be shy about like going into those financial aid offices and following up. And I think some financial aid offices were like easier to deal with than others. But you got to deal with the bureaucracy of it all. Yeah. I hope that helps.
All right. Thank you, Kathryn. That was great. So, oops, let's see. I know we're just about out of time here. Do we have one last thing? Okay, Drex, thank you. We're out of time, so I would love to ask, I have more questions, but I know everyone's busy, so I appreciate you all coming today. This was really, really great. I loved hearing everything that you had to say. I appreciate all of your expertise and your wisdom. Thank you so much for being here, y'all. This was really great. Where if you could just as just a quick wrap up, if we want to follow your work, how is it best that we follow you? If we want to get in touch with you, how can we do that?
For me, I think if I post anything interesting, it's on my Twitter.
Twitter, okay.
Just starting to use it more. So I'd say follow me on Twitter.
And then what is your handle, Larry? So we can find, or I guess we could just find it, but if you could tell us what it is.
I think it's my first name, last name. So
Okay.
at Larry Weru. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram, so at least right now. So it's just my name, Brittany Grass. You can find me on there, and you can find me on LinkedIn. Add me like on everything that you want. Instagram and LinkedIn are best, but I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime about anything. So
thank you, Brittany.
Yeah, I'm also most active on Instagram, but even then I'm just like not on social media very often. So I'll throw my email in the chat if anyone has any questions. I am happy to answer emails later on. So I'll put that out there. And yeah, I don't know. I'll try to be on social media more, but you can find me on Instagram.
I'm sure that's challenging when you're doing grad school, Kathryn. So I can appreciate that. Well, Brittany, Larry, Kathryn, thank you so much for taking the time to do this today. This was such a treat. I so appreciate you all. And thank you all, our people who came in today to share with us today. Thank you so much. Thank you for people that ask questions. I really appreciate that. I'm gonna adjourn us here, but if our presenters could stay just for a quick minute afterward, I'd appreciate that. But everyone, thank you for being here. I appreciate it. Have a great Friday. Have a great weekend. Thank you, Carrie. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.